On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Kowalski watched the holographic display as the Dominion fleet died in real time. Each destroyed ship was marked by a small flash on the display, and the flashes were coming so fast they blended into a continuous strobe of annihilation. "First volley complete," reported the tactical officer. 58% of enemy vessels destroyed or disabled. Recharging fold capacitors for second volley. "The enemy is attempting to scatter," added the sensor officer. "They're breaking formation, trying to disperse their fleet to reduce our target concentration." "Smart," Kowalski acknowledged. "Won't save them. Begin secondary targeting protocols. Focus on their dreadnoughts and carriers, anything with significant firepower. Leave the smaller vessels for last." "Admiral, we're detecting multiple faster-than-light signatures. Some of the enemy ships are attempting to flee the system." "Let them." Kowalski's voice was cold. "Let them run back to the Council and tell them what happened here. Let them. Tell them that the age of their dominion is over." The second volley was smaller, only 4,000 slugs, targeted at the surviving heavy vessels. But it was just as devastating. Dreadnoughts that had survived 1,000 years of Council service were torn apart from the inside as tungsten penetrators materialized in their most vulnerable systems. Carriers loaded with thousands of fighters watched helplessly as their hangar bays exploded, their carefully maintained weapons becoming fuel for their own destruction. By the time the third volley arrived, there were fewer than 1,000 Dominion ships remaining. Most of them were trying to flee, their drives pushed to maximum as they ran from an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't target, couldn't fight. One cruiser, the Testament of Glory, managed to get close enough to Earth to fire a single plasma lance at the defensive fleet. The beam was intercepted by a defensive screen projected from one of the orbital platforms, dissipating harmlessly into the void. A moment later, a railgun slug materialized inside the Testament of Glory's reactor. The battle, if it could be called a battle, lasted 11 minutes and 43 seconds. When it was over, the space around Earth was filled with the debris of 12,000 ships. Millions of Council soldiers and crew members had died, their bodies frozen in the vacuum, their final moments of confusion and terror locked forever in their expressions. Admiral Kowalski felt no satisfaction. This had not been a battle. This had been an execution. A necessary execution, but an execution nonetheless. "Signal Earth Command," she ordered quietly. "Phase 1 complete. Begin Phase 2 immediately." Part 4. The Nexus. The Galactic Council learned of the disaster within hours. The first survivors to make it back to controlled space were in a state of shock so profound that they could barely speak. Their debriefings were fragmented, contradictory, filled with descriptions of weapons that made no sense and attacks that violated every known law of physics. "They struck from nowhere," one captain managed to say before collapsing into unconsciousness. "The weapons, they came from inside our ships. There was no warning, no defense. It was like the universe itself had turned against us." High Chancellor Vorthax convened an emergency session of the Council. For the first time in living memory, there was fear in the Chamber of Eternal Harmony. The representatives who had voted so casually for humanity's extinction now looked at each other with expressions of barely contained panic. "How?" demanded Representative Crixall, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "How is this possible? Our intelligence indicated they had 42 ships. 42 ships cannot destroy 12,000. "Clearly, our intelligence was incomplete," said Ambassador Tleth quietly. She was the only council member who did not seem surprised by the news. "I warned you. I told you they were dangerous." "You warned us they were clever. You said nothing about weapons that can strike from within our vessels." Because I did not know the specifics, but I knew they were working on something. Their scientific community has been unusually secretive for the past decade. Their military procurement budgets showed anomalies that our analysts couldn't explain. They were preparing for this, preparing for us, and we walked directly into their trap. "Then we will send another fleet." Vorthax slammed his fist against his console. "We will send 50,000 ships, 100,000. We will darken their sun with our numbers until—" "Until what, High Chancellor?" Taleth interrupted, her voice sharp. "Until they destroy those ships too? Until they demonstrate that no matter how many vessels we send, they can destroy them all before they get within firing range?" She stood, her tail lashing behind her. "You don't understand what they've done. They haven't just developed a new weapon. They've developed a new paradigm. They've made distance and numbers irrelevant. As long as they can see a target, they can destroy it. Shields don't matter. Armor doesn't matter. Speed doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is whether or not they decide to pull the trigger." "Then what do you suggest?" asked Representative Holmach of the Trakani, his voice trembling. "Do we surrender? Do we negotiate?" "It may be too late for that. We declared war on them. We sent a fleet to exterminate them. Do you truly believe they will forgive that?" As if in answer to her question, every display in the council chamber suddenly went dark. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting the room in an ominous red glow. The representatives looked at each other in confusion. Then a new image appeared on every screen, a human face. Admiral Helena Kowalski stared out at the collected leadership of the Galactic Council, her cybernetic eye gleaming in the light of her bridge. "Honored council members," she said, her voice calm and clear. "I am Admiral Helena Kowalski of the United Earth Combined Defense Fleet. 1 hour ago, your Dominion fleet attempted to invade our home system. That fleet no longer exists. What I'm about to tell you will determine whether any of your species survive the next 24 hours." She let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "For 11,000 years, you have ruled this galaxy through fear. You have crushed dissent. You have enslaved species. You have dictated the terms of existence for every civilization in your reach. That ends today." She held up a small device, a remote of some kind. "Positioned throughout your Nexus station, in locations your security has already failed to discover, are 473 teleportation beacons. Each of these beacons is capable of receiving a railgun projectile traveling at relativistic velocity. At this moment, my finger is on the trigger. I can destroy your station, kill every single member of your council, and decapitate your entire governmental structure in less than 1 second. There is nothing you can do to stop me." Vorthax's face had gone pale, or what passed for pale in his species. "This is impossible. The Nexus has the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. No one could infiltrate." "Your security was designed to detect ships, Admiral, to detect infiltrators, to detect physical intrusion. It was not designed to detect a small device that can be teleported through solid matter." Kowalski's expression was grim. "We've been preparing for this moment for 3 years, High Chancellor. While your diplomats were arrogantly demanding our submission, while your spies were cataloging our primitive technology, we were planting seeds throughout your power structure. Seeds that are now about to bloom." "What do you want?" Tleth asked. She was the only council member who seemed to be maintaining her composure. If you're not here to destroy us, then you want something. What is it? Dissolution. Kowalski's voice was flat. The Galactic Council ends today. Every species under your control is now free. Every tribute agreement is void. Every territorial claim is null. You will return to your home systems, and you will never again attempt to impose your will on other species through force or threats. That's absurd, Krixall shouted. The Vordani have conquered half a quadrant. Our territories span. Your territories span exactly what the free species of those regions decide they span, Representative. If they choose to remain in association with you, that's their right. If they choose to claim independence, that's also their right. What you will not do is use military force to compel their obedience. Kowalski smiled thinly. And in case you're thinking of rebuilding your fleet and trying again once this crisis has passed, let me be clear. Earth is not alone anymore. The specifications for our fold technology are being transmitted to every species the Council has ever subjugated. By this time tomorrow, there will be thousands of worlds with the ability to do exactly what we did to your fleet. The age of empire is over, Representative. The only question is whether you accept that gracefully or learn it the hard way. High Chancellor Vorthax seemed to age 1,000 years in that moment. His species had founded the Council. They had been the center of galactic civilization for longer than most species had existed. And now a race of primitives? A species that had been banging rocks together when the Kalari were building stellar nations, was dictating terms to him? And if we refuse, he asked quietly, if we choose to die rather than submit to your demands, then you die. Kowalski's voice held no emotion. And your species join the billions of beings you've crushed over the millennia. You become a cautionary tale that future civilizations tell their children. Be careful how you treat others, or you might end up like the Council. Is that really how you want to be remembered? Silence hung over the chamber. Finally, Ambassador Tleth spoke. I vote to accept the humans' terms. Every eye in the room turned to her. Krixall sputtered with outrage. You would surrender? You would betray everything we've built? What we built was a house of cards balanced on the blood of conquered peoples. It was always going to fall, Representative. The only question was when and how. She met Kowalski's gaze through the screen. The humans are offering us a chance to survive, a chance to rebuild our civilizations on foundations that don't require the subjugation of others. I, for one, am wise enough to take that chance. One by one, the other council members cast their votes. Some raged against the injustice, the humiliation, the destruction of everything they had known. But in the end, with 473 teleportation beacons waiting to turn their station into debris, they had no choice. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Council dissolved itself in the same chamber where it had been founded 11,000 years earlier. The species that had ruled the galaxy through fear and force retreated to their home systems, their fleets scattered, their power broken. And humanity, a species that had been a footnote in the Council's records, a primitive curiosity barely worth cataloging, stepped onto the galactic stage as the architects of a new order. Part 5. The New Dawn. 1 year later, Admiral Helena Kowalski stood on a different observation deck, looking out at a different view. The Free World's assembly station was not as grand as the Nexus had been. It was smaller, simpler, designed by a coalition of liberated species who valued function over intimidation. But it represented something that the Nexus never had. Hope.
Quite a view,
said a familiar voice behind her. She turned to find Ambassador Tleth approaching, her feline features composed in what Kowalski had learned to recognize as an expression of respect. The former council member had become one of Earth's closest allies in the year since the dissolution, a liaison between the new order and the species who were still learning what freedom meant. "It is," Kowalski agreed, "though I prefer the view from Earth." "You miss home." "I do, but there's still work to be done here." Tleth joined her at the viewport, her golden eyes reflecting the stars. The final territorial disputes have been resolved. The Vordani have agreed to withdraw from the Terek system without further hostilities. The Kelari are cooperating with the Historical Commission to document their atrocities during the Council era. And Vorthax? Still in exile on his species' homeworld. He refuses to participate in the reconciliation process. But his influence continues to wane. The younger Kelari seem more interested in building a new future than mourning the old one. Kowalski nodded slowly. "That's strange. A year ago, we were facing extinction. Now we're helping to rebuild an entire galaxy." She paused. "Sometimes I wonder if we did the right thing." Tleth's whiskers twitched. "Surprise? You regret stopping the council?" "No. I regret how many had to die." Kowalski's voice was heavy with the weight of memory. 12,000 ships. Millions of lives. I gave that order, Tleth. I was the one who pulled the trigger on the fold weapons. Every single one of those deaths is on my hands. "They came to destroy your world," Tleth pointed out gently. "They came to enslave your species. You defended yourself." "I know, and I'd do it again if I had to, but that doesn't make it easier to live with." She turned away from the viewport. The first thing humans learn when we discover we're not alone in the universe is that violence works. That if we're clever enough and ruthless enough, we can defeat anyone. HFY Sci-Fi Story. Railguns fired, teleporters activated, and the Council's power died. Train yourself as an expert HFY storyteller and write me an HFY story about this title. Please and do not include any suggestions or bullet points. Write story in 40,000 characters. The Galactic Council had ruled for 11,000 years. 12 species, 12 voices, 12 seats arranged in a perfect circle within the Chamber of Eternal Harmony on the station they called the Nexus, a megastructure that dwarfed most planets, suspended at the gravitational null point between 3 dead stars. From this throne at the center of known space, they had dictated the rise and fall of civilizations, the boundaries of empires, the very definition of what it meant to be a spacefaring species. And for 11,000 years, no one had dared to challenge them. High Chancellor Vorthax of the Kelari adjusted his ceremonial robes as he looked down at the holographic display before his council seat. The Kelari were ancient beings, tall, skeletal creatures with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with the soft luminescence of dying stars. They had been the founders of the Council, the first to achieve faster-than-light travel, the first to subjugate lesser species for the greater good. The display showed a small blue planet, third from an unremarkable yellow sun, in an arm of the galaxy so distant from the center that most Council species had never bothered to visit. Earth. "The humans have rejected our final ultimatum," announced Representative Krixal of the Vordani, their insectoid mandibles clicking with barely contained excitement. The Vordani were the Council's enforcers, their species bred for war over countless generations. They lived for conflict, fed on it. They have stated, and I quote directly from their transmission, "The people of Earth will not kneel, not today, not ever. Bring your fleets, bring your armies, bring your gods if you have them. We will be waiting." A murmur passed through the council chamber. Some of the representatives laughed, the deep, rumbling laugh of species who had crushed hundreds of rebellions over millennia of dominion. "Amusing," said Vorthax, steepling his long, bone-white fingers. "Truly amusing. How long have they been a spacefaring species now? 3 of their centuries? And they presume to threaten us?" "They are dangerous, High Chancellor," spoke a quiet voice from across the circle. It belonged to Ambassador Tleth of the Mirini, a feline species known for their caution and their uncanny ability to sense approaching disaster. Her whiskers twitched, her golden eyes narrowed. "We should not dismiss them so readily. Our intelligence reports—" "Your intelligence reports speak of a species with barely 40 warships to their name," interrupted Admiral Zethkar of the Vordani Fleet Command, who had been granted special permission to address the council. His compound eyes gleamed with predatory hunger. "We have assembled 12,000 vessels from our combined armadas. The Dominion fleet alone could reduce their homeworld to ash. This is not a war, Ambassador. This is an extermination." Tleth's tail swished with agitation. "You have not read the full reports, Admiral. Or, if you have not understood them. The humans are primitives." Zethkar slammed one of his 4 arms against his podium. "They discovered fire while my ancestors were building the first stellar gates. They were painting on cave walls while the Kelari were establishing the first interstellar trade routes. They are insects beneath our notice, and yet they dare to defy the Council?" "They refused to surrender their sovereignty," Tleth said softly. "They refused to provide tribute. They refused to hand over their technological innovations for Council approval. These are not the actions of primitives, Admiral. These are the actions of a species that believes it can win." "Then they are delusional as well as primitive." High Chancellor Vorthax raised one elegant hand, silencing the debate. "The decision has already been made. The Dominion fleet will proceed to the Sol system and demonstrate the consequence of defiance. The humans will be given one final opportunity to surrender unconditionally. If they refuse—" he let the silence hang in the air like a death sentence. "If they refuse, their world will be cleansed. Their colonies will be cleansed. Every trace of their species will be erased from the cosmic record. Let this serve as a lesson to any other young species that might harbor thoughts of independence." The vote was perfunctory, 11-1, with only Tleth dissenting. Ambassador Tleth remained in her seat long after the others had departed, staring at the holographic display of that small blue world. She had studied the humans more closely than any other council member. She had read their history, their literature, their philosophy. She had watched recordings of their wars, their revolutions, their impossible triumphs against overwhelming odds. She knew something the others did not. She knew they should be afraid. Part 2. The Fleet Approaches. Admiral Helena Kowalski stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiance, flagship of Earth's combined defense fleet, and watched the stars through the reinforced transparent aluminum viewport. At 63 years old, she had spent 4 decades in the service of Earth's naval forces, First in the old wet navies, then in the early space programs, and finally in the ships that now defended humanity's small but growing territory among the stars. She was not beautiful by conventional standards. Her face was weathered, her gray hair cropped short, her left eye replaced with a cybernetic implant after a pirate attack in the asteroid belt 20 years ago. But there was a fire in her remaining eye, a steel in her spine, that made admirals and presidents alike defer to her judgment. "Admiral," said her aide, Commander David Chen, approaching with a datapad, "we've received the final intelligence reports from our stealth probes. The Dominion fleet has entered our system. 12,427 vessels, ranging from destroyer class to dreadnought. They'll reach Earth orbit in approximately 18 hours. Kowalski didn't flinch. Status of our defenses? All 42 combat vessels are in position. The planetary defense grid is online. All 12 orbital railgun platforms are charged and ready. Ground-based installations are manned and prepared." Chen paused. "Ma'am, I have to ask. 42 ships against 12,000. The planetary defenses might thin them out, but—" "But you're wondering why we're not running?" Kowalski turned to face him, and there was something in her expression that Chen couldn't quite read. "You're wondering why we didn't take the Council's deal, pack up our colonies, and become good little subjects." "The thought had crossed my mind, Admiral. I'll fight and die if that's what's required, but I'd like to understand why." Kowalski gestured for him to follow her. They walked through the corridors of the Defiance, past crew members who stood a little straighter as their admiral passed. These were good people, Chen knew. The best humanity had to offer. Engineers, tacticians, warriors, dreamers. They had volunteered for this, every single one of them. They reached a secure elevator that descended deep into the heart of the ship, past levels that even Chen hadn't been cleared to visit. When the doors finally opened, they stepped into a chamber filled with technology that made Chen's eyes widen. "What is this?" he whispered. "This," Kowalski said, with the slightest hint of a smile, "is why we're not running." The chamber was dominated by a massive ring of crystalline structures interwoven with conduits of flowing energy. Technicians moved around it with the careful precision of people handling something incredibly delicate and incredibly powerful. At the center of the ring, space itself seemed to shimmer and twist, as though reality was being gently folded. "We call it the fold drive," Kowalski explained. "But in practical terms, it's a teleportation system. Not for ships. The energy requirements for that would be astronomical. For this, though," she picked up a small metal slug from a nearby table and held it up. "For this, it's more than sufficient." Chen stared at the slug. It was the size of his thumb, made of tungsten alloy, a standard railgun projectile. "Admiral, are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that 3 years ago, a young physicist named Dr. Sarah Martinez figured out how to fold space. Not just for travel, Commander, for delivery." Kowalski's smile widened. "Our railgun platforms aren't just firing projectiles through space anymore. They're firing them through space. One moment the round is here, the next moment it's inside the enemy ship, past their shields, past their armor, directly into their reactors, their bridges, their ammunition stores." "That's—" Chen struggled to find the words. "That's impossible." "The Council thinks so too. That's why they're not worried about our 42 ships and our 12 railgun platforms. They've calculated our firepower based on conventional physics. They've estimated our rate of fire, our accuracy, our range. They've run their simulations and concluded that we can't possibly destroy more than a few hundred of their ships before we're overwhelmed." Kowalski set the slug back down on the table. "They're wrong." "How long has this been in development?" "Since first contact. When the Council's ambassadors came to us with their demands, their list of technologies we would have to surrender, the tribute we would have to pay, the freedoms we would have to give up, our leadership decided that we needed an edge, something they couldn't predict, something they couldn't counter. She led him to a display screen showing a map of the Sol system. We have 38 fold-capable railgun platforms, not 12. The additional 26 are hidden in the asteroid belt, the outer moons, places the Council's scans wouldn't think to look. We have 217 automated fold drones positioned throughout the system, each capable of serving as a relay point for teleported projectiles. And we have this. She pulled up another display, and Chen felt his blood run cold. It was a ship, or something that had once been a ship. It was massive, easily the size of a Council dreadnought, but its design was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was all angular surfaces and exposed machinery, with a single massive aperture at its bow that looked like the barrel of the largest weapon ever constructed. "We call it the Hammer of God," Kowalski said quietly. "It's not a railgun, it's not a missile, it's not a beam weapon. It's a fold projector, scaled up to planetary proportions. It can fold a tungsten rod the size of this ship directly into the core of a planet, or a star, or," she gestured vaguely at the display of the approaching fleet, "or the center of a fleet formation." Jesus Christ! "He's not going to help us, Commander. We have to help ourselves." Kowalski turned off the display. The Council has ruled for 11,000 years. They've forgotten what it means to fight an enemy that can hurt them. They've forgotten that every empire, no matter how mighty, is just one good idea away from falling. Today, they're going to remember. Part 3. First Blood. The Dominion fleet entered the outer reaches of the Sol system with all the pomp and arrogance of a conqueror approaching an undefended village. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Vengeance, surrounded by his command staff and an array of holographic displays showing the disposition of his forces. 12,000 ships, arranged in the classic Council formation, heavy dreadnoughts at the center, cruisers in supporting positions, destroyers and fighters in screening formations around the edges. It was a formation that had crushed rebellions on 100 worlds, a formation that spoke of absolute military supremacy. "The human fleet has positioned itself in high orbit around their homeworld," reported his sensor officer. 42 vessels, configured in a defensive sphere. Their orbital platforms are powered and tracking our approach. 42 vessels, Zethkar repeated, letting out a chittering laugh. They truly are insane. Signal the fleet, standard approach pattern. We'll give them one last chance to surrender before we demonstrate what happens to species that defy the Council. The Dominion fleet accelerated toward Earth, covering the vast distances of the outer system in hours thanks to their advanced drive systems. As they passed the orbit of the sixth planet, the one the humans called Saturn, Zethkar ordered his communications officer to broadcast on all frequencies. "Humans of Earth," he announced, his translated voice booming through space. "This is Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Council Dominion Fleet. You have defied the lawful authority of the Council and rejected our generous offer of protected status. You have one final opportunity to surrender. Power down your weapons, lower your shields, and prepare to receive our boarding parties. If you comply, your species will be spared. You will merely be enslaved rather than exterminated. If you refuse, we will destroy your fleet, reduce your cities to glass, and erase your species from the universe. You have 1 hour to respond." The response came in less than a minute. It was not a verbal message. It was not a diplomatic communication. It was a single railgun slug, approximately the size of a human finger, traveling at 99% of the speed of light. One moment, Admiral Zethkar was standing on his bridge, surrounded by his officers, waiting for the humans to grovel. The next moment, the slug materialized directly inside his brain. He was dead before he could process what had happened, dead before the supersonic shockwave of the impact could even begin to expand outward. The bridge of the eternal vengeance was transformed into a hurricane of fire and shrapnel as the kinetic energy of the slug released in a catastrophic explosion. And it was not alone. Across the Dominion fleet, 12,847 slugs materialized simultaneously, inside reactors, inside bridges, inside ammunition magazines, inside the skulls of commanding officers. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. In a single heartbeat, more than half the fleet simply ceased to exist, transformed from proud warships into expanding clouds of debris and cooling plasma. The survivors didn't even understand what had happened at first. There had been no warning, no targeting locks, no incoming fire that their sensors could detect. Ships had simply exploded from within, as though reality itself had decided they no longer deserved to exist. Then the second volley arrived,